Okay. What's happened? Oh, wait a minute. I kind of lost where we were. Oh, it's doing it on YouTube. Okay, great. Fantastic. Got it. All right, very good. All right, lovely. Let's start then. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start with the tefillah. Did I share my screen? It's very strange. That's it. Okay. All right. Good. ריבון העולמים ואדוני אדונים, אף רחמן וסליחות, מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, בקידה בשטח הוויה שקרבתנו לתורתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש. ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו אומר חיינו, אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה, על כן אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחול ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו, ועל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לביניך, וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן את לבבינו לראותך ולבבך, ותקשיב אוזניך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הרל בסודות תורתך, ולמדנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כיסא כבודך כורך ניחוח, תאציל עלינו, אור מקום נשמתנו בכל בחינתנו, שיתנוצצו ניצוצות עבודך הקדושים, אשר על ידם גלית דבריך אלה בעולם, וזכותם, וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם ותמימותם וקדושתם, יעמוד לנו לבן לקשר בדברים אלו, ובזכותם תראיננו במה שאנו לומדים, כמו המנעים זמירות ישראל, גל עיניי והביטה נפלאות מתורתך, כי אדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יהיו לו רצון ימי פי, וגאון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי. Amen. Can you rachon? Okay, great. So today we're going to be learning something which is very strange. I've always found this a very, very strange part of Torah, this whole issue of the half shekel. And we seem to read it twice, because we read it before, Rosh Chodesh Adar, we get Shabbos shekel, when we have to read this parasha about giving half a shekel. And then we get it again now in the Parsha Ki Tisa, where it actually belongs, okay, after Purim, about giving half a shekel. So this thing of giving half a shekel is obviously important if we have to read it twice, okay? So I never understood it. So this is why I thought this was a good opportunity. Let's have a look at it together and see what we can make of it, if anything, Bezrat Hashem. So first of all, I just want to read the actual portion together with you. So it's chapter Lamed, verse Yud Aleph. So I'll just get that up on the screen. 1 second. Okay. Chapter, what did I say? It's chapter 30. That's it. Right, so let me share that. How do I do that again? It's amazing. After all this time, I should know how to share things, shouldn't I? There we go. Right, here we go. It's chapter 30, verse 11. 30. That's right, verse 11. Right, so let me share that. Oh, why is it coming out twice? Oh, it must be the YouTube. Oh, 1 second. Let me see if I can switch off the volume. Here we go. How peculiar. It's chapter 30, verse 11. Oh, I see what's happening. You can hear it on verse 11. On the video as well. 1 second, let's see if I can just get rid of that for you. Oh, it must be the YouTube. Oh dear. Okay, I'll do that. I know how to do that. Don't panic. There. YouTube. Now I go. See what's happening. You can hear it on the video as well. I can just get rid of that for you. And I need to make it quiet. Done it. Right. Sorry, everybody. Now. Let's get back to where we were. Quiet. Done it. Right. Sorry, everybody. Did that not work? Should have done. Right. Get back to where we were. Okay. All right then. Now get back to where I was. Very peculiar. So all this technology, it's too complex. You share. No, I got confused. 1 moment. Let me just read it to be much easier. Okay, let me trying to find. Rather than me trying to find it on the screen. Right. V'daber Hashem al Moshe lemor. And God spoke to Moses saying, Ki tisak rosh b'nei Yisrael lifkudehem. When you raise up the head of the children of Israel to their pikudim. And it's not very clear what pikudim really means. It could be numbers, okay? V'natnu ish kofen nafsho l'Hashem. And each one will give a ransom of his soul to God. Bifkod otam. When you number them. And there won't be a plague when you number them. So everybody who gets numbered gives half a shekel. Half a shekel of a holy shekel. A holy shekel is esrim garar shekel. 20 garar is a shekel. Machatzita shekel. You give half a shekel to Mal Hashem. Okay, an offering for God. Anyone who goes over these numbers, mi benesim shana, one who belongs to that is for over 20 years old and upwards, yitain trumat Hashem, will give an offering to God. The rich man should not give any more, and the poor man should not give any less. Shekel, from half a shekel, trumat Hashem, to give the truma for God. To atone for your souls. And should take the money of this kippur from Bnei Israel and give it for the work of the oil moed. And should be for the children of Israel a remembrance before God to ransom for their souls. Well, that's very strange. Okay, I mean, we read it, but it's not an easy one. I don't understand it. Okay, right. So let's go to the Zohar and have a look at its inner meanings. And I actually found through the inner meanings actually quite a lot of help in understanding it. So that I do have ready. Hooray, Baruch Hashem. That should be okay. Yes. We're on the right page. That's a miracle. All right. So here you can see the Zohar, hopefully, and is the Rabbi. Actually, it's not Rabbi Shimon this time. It might be Rabbi Shimon. It's labeled Raya Mehemana, and there are some parts of the Zohar which Rabbi Shimon received from Moshe Rabbeinu. I guess Moshe Rabbeinu sort of like came inside Rabbi Shimon and somehow he gave over these inner meanings, and this one is labeled Raya Mehemana. Raya Mehemana means faithful shepherd. The faithful shepherd, of course, is Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, so here we go. Pikuda letate machatzita shekel b'shekel hakodesh. The mitzvah is to give half a shekel of the shekel hakodesh. Man machatzita shekel yukagon chatzi hahain. What is half a shekel? It is like half of the haze. Now, what does that mean? Okay, half of the haze. If you have yud, hey, vav, hey, okay. So what's in the middle between the two hays is the vav, all right? Memutza ben shnei hahain. It's the middle between the two hays of God's name. Ebaneh lemishkal will be for mishkal, ba da yud esrim gra a shekel, and the yud is 20 gra of a shekel. Da yud, and it explains how this works out in a minute. Hashir lo yirbeh, the rich man will not increase. Daim tu'uda de'em setita, that refers to the middle line. Lo yarbeh yud, he shouldn't get more on over yud. V'chi itamar be Sefer Yetzirah, Eses Sfirot Belima, and the Sefer Yetzirah is written 10 Sfirot, absolutely. Eser v'lo achadesrei, 10 and not 11. V'adal lo yamit, and the poor one should not give less. Dal tzaddik, that refers to the tzaddik, that's the yesod. Lo yamit mi eser, he shouldn't give less than 10. Kamosha Katuv Eser v'lo Teisha, it's also from Sefer Yetzirah, 10 and not 9. Mimachatzita shekel dihu yud, dihu yud. I think that's it. Yes, that's it. So, what does all that mean? Biur dvarim, explanation. This is where Rav Ashlag saves us. He really does. We first of all have to understand what is the inner meaning of these scriptures which are in the parasha. Like we said, we don't understand what any of this is about. All right. Ki tisa et rosh. When you lift up the head of the children of Israel, Hainu keshetamshich Gimel Rishonot B'nei Israel. Gimel Rishonot means that you're bringing there a full light, the big light of redemption, okay? Gimel Rishonot is a code word which says that all 10 Sfirot are present and they are all filled with light. So it's like the light of Chokhmah. Now, this light of Chokhmah comes not always. We have to make a vessel for it. And the vessel that we're talking about is the building of the Mishkan. Okay, and what's the building of the Mishkan? It's building a vessel where the presence of God is going to be absolutely present. Now, this building of the Mishkan, it's outside and it's inside. I mean, we've understood that, build me Mishkan v'shachanti b'tocham, and I will dwell within them. That means that each person needs to build a vessel for God, which the light of God can actually come inside of us. That's an amazing idea. It's an amazing idea, but that's the whole, the whole of the Torah is actually giving us instructions about how to relate to the light of God, both outside and inside of us, okay? The neshama, the soul, is a vehicle, a vessel for receiving the light of God within us. So here they're building the Mishkan, and the Mishkan is that God should be able to be within us. Well, that's a very big light, all right? Now, there's a very big problem with the big light, okay? And that is, if the light is too big for the vessel, a person can unwittingly, not on purpose, but unwittingly begin to receive it for himself alone. This is, in fact, I think, one of the reasons why we read this parashah before and after Purim. Because what happened when the Jews went to the Su'udah of Achashverosh, there was a very great light there, because it was the light of redemption which needed to come into the world because of the temple, okay? And again, you have the same idea that the building of the temple is coming about. Here you've got the building of the Mishkan, all right? And there was a big light coming in. And we learnt that when that big light comes in, there's a danger to receive it for ourselves alone. It's what we learnt last week, okay? So we've got the story of Purim, what actually happened. They actually did receive it for themselves alone, and they adopted the way of Haman, and then they had to do tshuva to deal with deal with the sin that they did. Okay, they were destined for Kiliyah. So when you have this big light coming in, it's too big for our vessels, and in any case, it's not what we should be doing. We should be giving rather than receiving. So here, the Torah is actually giving us instructions how to handle it, okay? Not, God forbid, to fall in like we fell in at Purim, okay? But to how to handle it in advance, okay? So this is where we are. Remember that this Machatzita Shekel parashah is before the sin of the golden calf. That's another time when we fell in, okay? But here it gives us instructions of actually how to handle it. When you're bringing this big light and it comes to the children of Israel, because this big light is called Rosh, lipukudehem, to their pikudim. Pikudim in the language of the Kabbalah refers to the mitzvot when we can perceive the light within them. Now, normally we do mitzvot and, we do them. We not necessarily feel the light in them. All right. Sometimes we feel the light, many times we don't. We say a bracha and, say this formula and you don't necessarily feel anything. Okay. You have to try to do it like with meaning and with intention. It doesn't always work. All right. So at that point, the mitzvot are doing from the place of faith only. And that's good. It's not wrong. It's part of the building of the vessel. Okay. It's great. Okay. Other times when we're doing the mitzvah, it could be the same mitzvah, suddenly we're connected. All right. And that's when the mitzvah becomes pikudim. It becomes filled with light. And that only comes by God's grace. You can't, it happens sometimes and it doesn't. Here, he relates the word pikudim also according to the three ways the light comes into the vessel. First of all, it can come, like we say, above the vessel, and the vessel doesn't feel it. So that's called katnut. It's called that the experience is that we do it out of faith. We don't necessarily feel anything. Sometimes the light is actually present and it's in the vessel, but like we say, it can be too great. And there's a danger of receiving it and then going, and receiving it for ourselves alone. The chirik, okay, which is the vessel, which is the light which comes from underneath the vessel, means that when the light is present in the vessel, we need to do an action which is going to cover that light with the light of giving, with the light of loving kindness. And it's when we do that, we bring balance. We bring balance into it, okay? Then it's not too big and it's not too small. It's just right, okay? So if we go over these three nukudot again, the holam actually these are three different vowels. These are names of vowels, okay? The cholam is the vowel which is above the letters. It's that oh sound above the letters. And that signifies the time when the light is above us. We're not able to receive it, and we need to do the mitzvot out of faith alone. The shuruk is the oo sound, okay? And that's the vowel which is inside the letter, all right? So that's that oo sound, and it signifies the light is present in the vessel. And like we said, that can be problematic, because on the one hand, it's wonderful we have the light, but on the other hand, there is a danger of a kind of sting in its tail, that we can receive it and it's too much, and it can lead us to receive for the sake of receiving, which is precisely what happened to the Jews in Purim. And then the balance comes from the chirik. This is from below. It's when the person puts a brake on receiving and does good deeds instead, prefers to be a giver, says, listen, God, this light is too great. I don't want to be a receiver. I prefer to be a giver. And this is, the chirik is the E sound underneath the vessels, okay, underneath the letters. And it represents us coming from below with prayer, with good deeds, with mitzvot, with gimilut chasadim, where this causes a balance, because what it does is it clothes the light in the vessel with loving kindness, and now there's no danger of us receiving too much and taking it for ourselves alone. And this is what he writes here. V'natnu ish kofer nafsho l'Hashem, and each person shall give a ransom of his soul for God. In other words, he needs to refrain. Nazir is like the Nazarite. He's somebody who's ascetic, okay? Now, asceticism in general is not required in Judaism, but here we have to refrain. We have to refrain from bringing this great light. We have to refrain from bringing this great light into the vessels of receiving. But he needs to raise it back up to God. And if we do that, then we won't fall into receiving for ourselves alone. The Negev is, there won't be a plague, all right? But truth to tell, Rav Ashlag writes that the source of all our sufferings, whether it's physical or mental or emotional, or whether it's personal, or whether it belongs to the whole community, all right, the source is the will to receive for ourselves alone. When we take the light and use it in the way which is opposite than the way God intended, in a way which separates us from God instead of bringing us close to him. So if instead of receiving this great light, we put a line, we say, no, we're not going to receive it the way it is. We're going to raise it back up to God. We're going to be a giver rather than a receiver. And this is the way of Mordechai. This is the way of the Jewish people. And that way there's no Negev. But if he does receive, pull towards himself this great light of Chokhmah, there can be a plague, chas v'shalom, and the plague is just one of the possible outcomes, which could be caused by our will to receive ourselves alone. It can be a negef, it could be a bodily illness, it can be mental, it could be suffering of all sorts, okay? But the suffering itself is the tikkun. The real problem is the separation caused by our receiving too much light. All right. Okay. Is everybody okay with all of this, or do you want to ask any questions?
Yadida?
Yeah.
I still don't understand how giving a half a shekel rectifies all this.
Good question, but we haven't got to there yet.
Okay.
Great. The Hainu, Mikra Hadinim, the small Kanodan. So the problem is the vessels of receiving. And the vessels of receiving in the Kabbalah are called the left-hand line, okay? Whereas the vessels of giving are called the right-hand line. And this have got nothing to do with left and right in politics, okay? What it has got to do with is the orientation of things in the Beit HaMikdash, okay? If you were to stand, for example, in the Beit HaMikdash, from where the light all emanates from, which is the Kodesh HaKodeshim, okay, if you can imagine yourself on that spot, all right? If you can imagine yourself on that spot, okay, then Chesed, which is the right-hand line, is on your right-hand side. And Gvura, which represents the vessels of receiving, would be on your left-hand side, the north side. Chesed would be the south, and Gevura would be the north. So you have right and you have left. Okay, so giving is considered as the right-hand line, and receiving is called the left-hand line. Now, the left-hand line, the vessels of receiving, are problematic, like we say, because they do have a tendency to draw to themselves so much light. Now, why is the light difficult? Why is this a problem? The problem is that the light of God is so sweet. It's so beautiful. And we are born as natural receivers. And we can completely forget God once the light comes and it's so sweet. We just get completely overwhelmed with it and forget that our purpose is actually only to give pleasure to the Creator and not to receive it for ourselves alone. Because if we receive for ourselves alone, we get separated from Him. And because the light is so sweet, too much light is dangerous. And the way of the Jew is the way to give back, the way to be giving, even when the great light of God comes. Okay, so b'shekel HaKodesh, what does shekel HaKodesh mean? Hainu hamshachat ha'chochma, Hashem madriga shleimai 20 gra shekel. So he explains it now, how this relates to the shekel, that the shekel HaKodesh means bringing the full light of Chochmah, a whole stage, which is 20 gra hashekel, 20 gra for us to make up a shekel. Keep a madriga shlema, because in a whole spiritual level, yesh ba 10 sfirot d'or zachar, hamushpa mimala lamata. There are 10 sfirot of light, okay, which God gives to us, okay, which comes from above and goes to below. And there's 10 sfirot which belongs to from the work of the created being, of the receiver, which is given from below to above. V'hem isrim sfirot, and together they make up 20 sfirot. That's the 20 gerah, which make up a whole shekel. V'liotam mibchinat hasmol, and because they're coming to us from the light coming into the vessels of receiving, הם מכונים 20 gerah. They're called 20 gerah, and here he tells us something extra about the word gerah. It's not just a measurement. Milashon ger hayiti be'etz nochia, from the language of I was a stranger in a strange land. In other words, on the one hand, you could say the light is good, it comes from God, but on the other hand, it causes us to be estranged because we're receiving too much light. What's the answer? Machatzita shekel. Okay, half a shekel. Shu eses sfirot de'or zachar truma l'Hashem. We need to take the 10 sfirot of light, which we are getting from God, and give them back. Teruma l'Hashem. Now, the word teruma means raise them back up. Teruma, the word terum means to raise up. Okay? Teruma l'Hashem. Give them back up to God. To raise them up to God. Not bring them down to us, but raise them back up to God. We can only bring and relate to the half of the light, which is on our province, which is the light we give back. Which is the aspect from below to above. So, what is this really saying? It's saying that even receiving for the sake of giving, okay, which is exactly the same learning we had on Purim, even receiving, which would be receiving the great light, for the sake of giving, which would be that receiving the great light, which would be the male aspect from above to below, and the female aspect is for the sake of giving from below to above. If it's a whole measure, the full 20 gerah, it's problematic. Even when we're talking about receiving for the sake of giving, even when we're talking about the light which comes when we're building the Mishkan, even when we're talking about the light which comes when we're trying to build that vessel for God, if it's too much light, it's problematic. What we need to do, we need to let go of the light which comes from above to below and just concentrate on the aspect of us giving back to God. And that's what we need to do. So this is a story, this is a refrain which we see again and again and again in the teachings of Rabbi Ashlag. It's just amazing how many times this story actually comes in. In his own life, there's this episode where he arrives at the Rabbi of Belz and he's completely enlightened. Okay, it happened to him when he was quite a young man. He'd obviously progressed extremely in his spiritual work. He'd reached a very high level in which he's actually receiving the full light of God for the sake of giving. And he arrives at the Beit Midrash of the Rabbi of Belz, and he's completely lit up, okay? Now, he's receiving it all in a completely kosher way. It's receiving for the sake of giving. Nevertheless, when he arrives at the Beit Midrash of the Rabbi of Belz is not at all pleased to see him in that state and rebukes him. It was on Shabbat, he obviously arrived Erev Shabbat, and he rebukes him and he's sarcastic to him. He says, a lion is not afraid, a bear is afraid, but a lion is not afraid. And that was a play on words because Rabbi Yehuda Lev Ashlag's middle name Leib in Yiddish means a lion, and Yisocha Dov Belz, Rabbi of Belz's name was Dov, which was a bear. And right throughout Shabbat, he was making these very sarcastic comments about how Rav Ashlag was leaving. He'd come to say goodbye to the true wisdom, and he's surprised he didn't leave some wine over from Kiddush the night before, and all sorts of comments which made his response to Rabbi Ashlag's state very obvious. So here's Rabbi Ashlag, and he's feeling this great experience of the light of God inside of him. And he's very, very, very clear, checks again and again and again that the light is shining for him in a way he could absolutely physically taste it. And it was totally, totally kosher. In other words, it was completely for the sake of giving. And there was no aspect of this of receiving for himself alone at all. And yet, on the other hand, his rabbi, who he greatly revered, is very clearly showing his displeasure. And he doesn't know what to do. He just doesn't know what to do. So he's tossing and turning all through the night, and he absolutely doesn't know what to do. And he keeps going over it again and again in his mind, and he still doesn't know what to do. And then finally, he makes a decision. If his rabbi shows him that what he's doing is wrong, he will straight away obey his rabbi. Now, that is the most amazing decision to make, because he could taste that sweetness of the light, and to be willing to say, if his rabbi tells him he needs to give it up, he's willing to give it up. And that's the machatzita shekel. It's the letting go. It's giving it back. And this is exactly what Rav Ashlag actually did, that he's willing to let go of this great light and only keep the half which it is giving, and not have the great light which was illuminating him. And to actually do this in practice, Trumal Hashem, is a gift to God. It's the greatest gift that anybody could ever give. But the Rabbi of Belz absolutely teaches him that this is the way of the Jew. And so once Rav Ashlag saw this, and it took him a while, it wasn't easy for him to see it, okay, then he accepted it. And he then teaches it. It comes up, the more, once you learn that story, then you begin to see it everywhere. Like, it comes up in Purim, it's coming up here, okay? It's coming with a crossing of the Red Sea. It's dividing the sea into half, that they came out at midnight, dividing the night into half. Suddenly this idea of dividing the light into half, it becomes, it's everywhere, okay? And here it is clearly here. And this is what they said. Man machatzita shekel. What is this half a shekel? Moses, according to the Midrash, had a lot of difficulty with this one. And I think when the tzaddikim first come to this idea, it's very difficult, because the light, they're not receiving the light in a non-kosher way. The light they're receiving is kosher, all right? And yet, if it's too much, there's a danger of the sin of the tree of knowledge. There's a danger of breaking of the vessels. There's a danger of the Haman, okay, waking up his ugly head, all right? So, man machatzita shekel, what is half a shekel? It's halfway between the two hays, okay? The first hay is Bina, the last hay is the Malchut. Halfway is the Zer Anpin. What's the tchuna of the Zer Anpin? The characteristic of Zer Anpin? The characteristic of Zer Anpin is the desire to give unconditionally with only a tiny illumination of the light of Chokhmah, not the great light of Chokhmah, only a tiny illumination of the light of Chokhmah to keep the vessels going. Okay? Bina is the desire to give unconditionally, but it also has order Chokhmah present. And the Malchut is the desire to receive, and at this point, it is probably empty. And he explains, and the Vav is the middle line between these two hays. Hay is the first hay is the Bina, which has got the light, and the Malchut, which doesn't have the light and wants the light on the one hand, but needs to put a masach, needs to put a barrier over its own desire. And the Vav is that middle line. It's the Zerampin, which has mostly the light of giving and just a tiny amount of Herad Chokhmah to keep illumination of the light of Chokhmah to keep it going. So it really is like the compromise, the middle line. Okay, it's got aspects of both in it. Shenikra mitkala, and it's called a mo'oznaim. It's like a mishkal, a weighing machine. What do you call it? A scales. Okay. Hashokel shtei horot, you mean the small, and it weighs the two lights which come from the right-hand line and the left-hand line. Shubsod shtei hahayim, which is the inner meaning of these two hays. Okay. Shelo yeh small gadol miyamin. So we don't want the left-hand line, which is the desire to receive, greater than the right-hand line, which is the desire to give. So the right-hand line would be Bina, and the left-hand line would be the Malchut. But Al-Ken small, and therefore it lessens the light of the light of the vessels of receiving. That the light should not shine from above to below, only mimata lamala bilvad, only it will shine from below to above, only from the aspect of giving, not from our aspect of receiving. But as who shaveh mayamin, and that balances this desire to receive, okay, on which the light is coming. It's the desire to receive in holiness, but it's got a sting in its tail, like I said. So we need to lessen it, okay, until it's equal in balance with the desire to give. Which can give light from above to below, because the desire of giving means it's or the chasadim, which comes from above to below, the light of loving kindness, and nobody's going to go wrong with that. So it's the vav between the two hays which divides the shekel, which divides that full light to Mal Hashem as an offering to God, which is half the light which comes on the vessels of receiving, as we've said. So far, so good. Well, let's keep going. Hope for the best. V'zamru evne lemishkal ba'dayud 20 gra shekel dayud. So what is the shekel built up of? All right, it's yud and yud vov daled. So you've got, wait a minute, you've got yud is 10 and vov daled, which is the other way of spelling 10, is 20. All right, you've got yud, vav is 6 and 4 is 10. You've got two lots of 10 is 20. Ki yud b'meloah, because yud, when it's spelled out in its long form, takes teaches us that there's full stage, spiritual stage of light present. Why? She'or zachar, because the light which comes from God, who sod yud, okay, which is actually true. If you think about it, all the letters all start with the letter yud, okay? They all come from above. When you draw them, they all come from a yud, and then they sort of lengthen or they go down a bit or whatever. But that's how you draw them. You all start from the yud. If you watch a scribe writing a Sefer Torah, he always starts with a sort of yud form, and then he lengthens it, or he goes sideways this way, sideways that way, okay, down, whatever, okay, but it always begins with the shape of the yud. So the light of which comes from God is in the meaning of the yud. But the light that we give back, usod vav daled, is the other two letters, which also make up the number 10, and they're made up of a vav and a daled, which is 6 and 4. So together with the yod, you have 20. And this is the inner meaning of esrim gerah, a shekel. The shekel is made up of 20 gerah. V'omer, she'even sheshoklim ba truma l'Hashem, that the stone which we weigh the truma for God is yud, d'hainu or zachar shemimala lamata, okay, is the light which we receive from above to below. They let that go, and they just receive the other yud, which belongs to the vav daled, which is the light of loving kindness, the light of which we give back most of the light, okay, and just receive what we need to keep going. All right, so the rich man isn't going to increase on that. And this refers to the middle line, which is Tiferet, which is own essence. It tends to the aspect of giving. And it doesn't require the light of Chokhmah, al kenika ashir, and therefore it's called rich. Okay, that's Tiferet. It tells you shan't increase on 10. Means you mustn't include with that anything from the light of the best of the feminine aspect, which is going from below to above. You mustn't offer up that aspect as Truma L'Hashem. In other words, you mustn't give up on your aspect of giving, okay? You only give up on the aspect of receiving. That's what he's telling us here. In other words, don't lessen your giving simply because you're not receiving. Keep going with the giving. That's what he's thinking. Don't give up. Let go of the light of receiving, but don't give up on your giving. And this is what it says in the book of the Yetzirah, 10 sfirot. That's it. 10 and not 11. V'imazerampin, that's Tiferet, the middle line. Yarbel machatzit shekel, okay. It increases on the machatzit shekel. What can it increase? Okay. Shi'ale gam midat ma me'onikeva, that it gives up also from its giving. Nimtza shela hadasa sfirot. We found that he actually gave up 11 sfirot, which is wrong. Okay. That is more than 10. So that's why the Torah warns us, don't make it 11. Just let go of the light of receiving. Don't let go of your work of giving. And the poor one should not give less. That tzaddik, this refers to the tzaddik. What's the tzaddik? The yesod. Now the yesod has more of a tendency to the light of chokhmah, because the yesod is the sphira which needs the light of chokhmah, because it needs to give it to the malchut when it's appropriate. And since it's needy, okay, al kenika be'erka dal, so therefore it's called, in comparison to the tiferet, it's called poor. Lo yamit, it should not be less than 10. Lo yamit me'eser, should not be less than 10. Shelo yash'ir midat ma me'eser sfot ha'zachar, it shouldn't leave behind with itself some aspect of the 10 sfirot of the light which is being received. Shelo yaleh Hashem, rather than giving it up to God. And this can happen because of its desire to receive the light of Chokhmah, because the Yesod is the one that gives to the Malchut. Kamosh Katuv, Eser velo Teisha. So the Sefer Yetzirah emphasizes this by saying 10, not 9. In other words, you mustn't leave with you an aspect of the light of which you receive, but you have to give it all back. In other words, don't have one bit left behind with you. So you should have 10 and not 9. Because if he was to lessen from the measure of the 10 sfirot of the light of Zachar, the light of receiving, which he doesn't raise up, we find that he didn't raise up 10 sfirot, only 9. And it needs to be 10 and not 9. Ant b'shamayim, rachim ant mimarecha, leitava b'kol inon milin yakirin livkon mipomcha, daman di'ir malka, or barada malka, leitava, divkon margalin b'turei, malin skulot, malyan nahorim, levan ha'ir tava, amale barich ant raya mahemana, mitaman ba'elach eima ant, Dalin de tate in nachtul masma minach. Amale ashlim minulech. Amale lo it ka'alna mimayatir. Ema ant ad zimna achra. That Vaya Mehemana said to him, who's the Vaya Mehemana? Moshe Rabbeinu. It appears, the Baal Shalom says, that the author of this piece of Zohar was Rabbi Shimon. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, you are in heaven, beloved you are of your master. Valken en pele, no surprise, because no surprise that from mouth comes such beautiful, precious words. Ki mishu melech or ben melech en pliya sholim magal shulchano. Because whoever is a king or the son of a king, we're not surprised that he's able to bring up the most beautiful pearls on his table. Mele'im skulot, filled with virtues. Mele'im orot, filled with lights. L'adam acher mimcha has a pele. For anybody else, it would be a completely amazing event. This is a totally amazing. Amalo, he said to him, Baruch atarai mehemana, blessed are you, faithful shepherd. Misham v'hala amarata. From now on, he said you, ki elyonim v'tachtonim yardu lishmor mimcha, because both the higher ones and the lower ones came down to hear from you. Amalo, hashlem dvarecha. He said, complete your words. Amalo, Eni Atalo Mayote Adzmonache. He said, I don't have anything more to say until another time. Emoata. You say. Okay, so that is really the end of the discussion, okay, on the Machatzita shekel. All right, then they go on to talk about the Kiddush HaChodesh, okay, which we looked at not long ago. Have we got time? No, not really. I think we've done very well. Anybody want to comment on what we learned or ask a question?
Yedida?
Yes.
This sounds very formula about how to kind of use that half a shekel to not take down too much light and get burnt. But how do we apply this in our practical lives? Like, how do you apply that?
Okay, very good question. It's an exceptionally good question. So I think that the light of God, it's like sort of like for us, we go in cycles, like day and night kind of thing. We have days and nights in our spiritual life as well. We have sort of like this ebb and flow. Yeah. So when we're in the night aspect, when God's light is not revealed to us, we have to go with faith, because there isn't any other way to connect with God at that point. If we want to stay connected, we have to go in faith. Absolutely. And just keep going with our tefillot and with our mitzvot. When the light of God comes to us, okay, and we do get times when we feel more up, more together, more connected. Also, there are times of the year when the light of God is closer. You have this is a very powerful time. You have Purim, you've got Pesach. Okay. I think in balance, we have to increase, again, our aspects of giving rather than just receive. So like, for example, the light of Pesach is coming close. All right. So we're all going to Bezrat Hashem be sitting there on Seder night, and we're going to be receiving this great light of God, the light of redemption. And that Bezrat Hashem, we should all receive the light of redemption from our own inner Pharaoh, not just our external pharaohs or historical pharaohs, but our inner Pharaoh and our, narrow straits of consciousness, and be released from that, Bezrat Hashem. Now, because of this great light coming, therefore, we need to know in advance how to handle it so that we don't receive it too much. So what do we do? Since we know it's coming, we're told we need to clean our houses and get rid of the chametz. Okay, so we have to get rid of any tendency to receive it for ourselves as a preparation for the great light which is coming. Now, in our daily lives during the year, we might not get that preparation if possible, all right? But it teaches us that when it does happen and the light of God does come, we're not taken by surprise like this, as we would be if it just came suddenly, but we're aware that we need to, don't take it for ourselves, don't get too excited, don't let it go to your head, just have that awareness that if it's too much, it can be dangerous. And what we need to do is we absolutely need to say thank you, maybe give extra to tzedakah, maybe go out of our way to do a kind deed to somebody, maybe to do some more davening, okay? And to balance it, so keep it in balance, all right? because there's times when there's less light in our lives, there's times when there's more light. If there's more light, remember to keep it in balance. And the word shekel, machatzita shekel, is exactly that idea of taking that shekel, that mishkal, which is the balance, and putting the balance down the middle, okay? That we're only going to take what is necessary for us, but basically we're going to increase our giving so that we keep our everything in balance. That, I think, would be how I would relate to this.
Great. What a great explanation.
Hashem. Well, it
Thank you.
came from the soul, from me, I can tell you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it was a beautiful, beautiful. I'm so grateful we had the opportunity to learn that, because, you know, this half a shekel thing was, like I said, quite a mystery to me. You know, I had no idea really what it was about till we get to learn it. And there's much more to it, I think, from that, because in Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag's writings, he also approaches it from a slightly different angles, but Bezrat Hashem, we'll learn that next year. What can I tell you? One bit at a time.
Okay.
All right, my dears. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to see you
Shabbat
all.
shalom.
Have a lovely Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, absolutely. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Shabbat
Bye.
Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Wonderful.